I speak to you in the name of God, Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. Amen. There is a theme that runs through today's Old Testament and Gospel readings that is easy to miss when read separately, but impossible to miss when we read them together. And it is a theme of God showing up, and that God promises and God sends. God shows up, he promises, and he sends. In the Old Testament reading, it is the heat of the day, the hour when sensible people are resting indoors. And Abraham is sitting at the entrance of his tent by the oaks of Mamre when three strangers appear. And what stands out is Abraham's response. He offers extraordinary hospitality. He doesn't send a servant to greet these people. He does it himself, and he bows before them, and he calls himself their servant, and he provides water for their feet, shade for their rest, and food to eat. And the food that he shared with them, it wasn't a snack. It was like a 3-course meal. And Abraham does not yet know that he is welcoming the Lord. However, in spite of that, he extends lavish generosity to these unknown travelers. And there is a lesson to be learned about hospitality as an act of faith. Abraham doesn't know what the day will bring or that these visitors will change everything. Just like us, we don't know when we get up on mornings what the day will bring. But he simply opens his life to them. And in doing so, he opens himself to an encounter with God. And centuries later, the writer to the Hebrews, chapter 13 and verse 2, echoes the same sentiment. Do not neglect to show hospitality to strangers, for by doing that, some have entertained angels without knowing it. Do not neglect to show hospitality to strangers, for by doing that, some have entertained angels without knowing it. We never know when welcoming someone that may be where God shows up and speaks. We never know. We never know when welcoming someone whether or not God will not show up, that God will not speak to us. And that is what happens here. In the middle of an ordinary welcome, something extraordinary occurs. One of the visitors, revealed as the Lord, makes a promise. I will return to you, and Sarah, your wife, shall have a son. And meanwhile, Sarah is listening at the tent entrance, and she laughs. And I heard us laughing when she said that she didn't laugh, but she laughed. And it was not a laugh of joy or politeness, but someone who had stopped believing. A laugh that was shaped by decades of disappointment and a 25-year promise that was recorded in Genesis chapter 12 that has not come to fruition. Waiting had worn the promise thin, and being both elderly, both her and Abraham, Sarah's laughter is not mockery, it is exhaustion. She has given up on having a child. So when she laughs, it is as if she's saying, after all this time, you want to tell me it's now going to happen? To which the Lord asks, is anything too wonderful for the Lord? Or some translations put it, is anything too hard, too difficult for the Lord? And that question comes in moments when things are so far beyond possibility that disbelief is our only response. Many of us know Sarah's laugh. and her situation, we have been in both cases. We have stopped expecting a promise to be fulfilled, or we have quietly stopped praying because years of waiting seem hopeless. And like Sarah, we have reached the point of no longer expecting something we hope for to happen. Then 3 chapters later, about a year later in the story, it happens. The Lord did for Sarah as he had promised. Isaac is born. The passage repeats the point repeatedly. God did what he said he would do. And Sarah laughs again, but this time the laughter is different. God has made me laugh, and everyone who hears will laugh with me, she said. The laughter of disbelief becomes the laughter of joy. And even Isaac's name, which means he laughs or laughter, becomes a lasting reminder that God's promises outlast our doubts. God's promises outlast our doubts. God did not rebuke Sarah's first laugh and then withhold the blessing until her faith improved. The promise came anyway. God's faithfulness does not depend on our ability to believe perfectly. We often live in the long space between promise and fulfillment, and that space can last for a long time. It can last for years, but it is not the whole story. And then we move forward to centuries later, to today's gospel reading, and to Jesus traveling through villages and towns and teaching and proclaiming the gospel, proclaiming the good news, and healing every disease and affliction. And Matthew tells us something tender, that when Jesus saw the crowds, he had compassion for them, because they were harassed and helpless like sheep without a shepherd. Jesus sees people who are lost, people who are worn down, people who are in need of care. And they have no one to lead them, no one to guide them. The leaders who should have shepherded them are more concerned with their own standing than with the well-being of the flock. And this vision shapes everything that follows. Jesus turns to his disciples and says, the harvest is plentiful, but the laborers are few. The harvest is plentiful, but the laborers are few. He does not choose to do it all alone. He sends others. But before he commissions them or gives them instructions or warns them of persecution, he stops to see the people before him. He sees their weariness, their need, their loss of direction, and he is moved with compassion. And so he commissions the 12, and he gives them authority, and he sends them out with almost nothing. No money, no extra clothes, no staff, no shoes for the journey. They go in total dependence on God. That's what that means. They go in total dependence on God. Just as Abraham depended on God's provision when he left his homeland and was sent to a land that he didn't even know about where it is, how to get there. But he depended on God to guide him, to lead him. And just as Sarah depended on God's timing for the birth of her son, it is the same for the disciples and for us. Jesus is honest with them. He does not promise an easy road. He tells them that they will be like sheep among wolves, that they will face opposition, and that they may be brought before authorities. And this is no polished recruitment speech. It is a call into real difficulty, sustained by confidence that the one who sends them will also sustain them. And so this is where these two passages meet, my friends. In Genesis, God comes to Abraham's tent unannounced in the form of ordinary travelers needing welcome. And in Matthew's gospel, Jesus sends his disciples out as ordinary travelers who will need welcome from others. The same God who once arrived at someone's door is now sending people to knock on doors. And in both cases, the message is similar. God is doing something new. What seemed impossible, a barren woman bearing a child, the kingdom of heaven breaking into ordinary towns, is now becoming a reality. I want you to take these three things away with you as you leave here today. First, hospitality matters more than we often realize. Hospitality matters more than we often realize. Abraham's welcome of strangers became the occasion for receiving a divine promise. We do not always know who, maybe even what, we are welcoming when we open our doors, our church, our time, our attention to others. Abraham's hospitality was not a strategy for getting a blessing. It was simply who he was. He was a hospitable person. His door was open. His table was generous. And his life had room for the unexpected. And because his door was open, heaven's promise entered his home. And the same may be true for us when we practice genuine welcome and hospitality, both at home, as a church, or wherever we are. We do not offer hospitality to receive it in return, yet we often benefit from the hospitality of others, and that should encourage us to extend the same kindness whenever people come into our lives. Second, that God's promises happen in God's time and not ours. God's promises happen in God's time and not ours. Sarah waited for decades, and we are no different. We carry promises that seem impossible, a relationship we have prayed over for years, a calling we have stopped expecting, a burden we have come to accept as permanent. And like Sarah, our laughter can become more an expression of weary cynicism than of faith. And yet God didn't punish Sarah's doubts by withholding the promise. God does not do that. Grace does not wait for perfect faith before it acts. Instead, God asks the question that reorients everything. Is anything too wonderful for the Lord? Is anything too difficult for the Lord? And then he does what he said he would do, but it's on his own time, his own timing. Not Sarah's, not ours. So if there's a promise you have quietly stopped believing, or prayer that is unanswered, hear that question. Is anything too wonderful for the Lord? Is anything too difficult for the Lord? Hear that question, not as an acquisition, but as invitation. The laughter of doubt can become the laughter of joy. Although we may have to wait a long time first, but do not mistake delay for denial. And third, we are a sent people. We are a sent people. Just as the disciples were sent out with the message that the kingdom of heaven is near, we carry the same news into our ordinary lives, into our workplaces, into our neighborhoods, and into our families. Like the hymn that we just sung, we have a gospel to proclaim. That is what Jesus sent the disciples out to do, to proclaim the good news, to proclaim his gospel. We go without guarantees of ease, but we go because the harvest is plentiful, and the one who sends us is faithful. And since the harvest belongs to the Lord, it is the Lord who sends the workers. And so if our ministry here, or our church and witness, run only on our own strength, on our own energy, we will probably fail, or we will stall. But when they flow from prayer and dependence on God, they become part of something larger than us. For we do not generate God's mission, we join in God's mission. We don't start it. We don't create it. We join in it. We participate in it. Before the disciples are sent, they're taught to ask the Lord of the harvest for laborers. May we come to see that the God of Abraham's tent, the God who gave Sarah a son named Laughter, and the God who sent the 12 on mission to proclaim the gospel, is the same God who meets us. He is the same God who calls us to hospitality, the same God who keeps his promises, although we may sometimes have to wait longer than we hoped. And he's the same God who sends us out to share in his work, expecting that we will receive hospitality and a warm welcome from others in return.